Okay, welcome everyone to another Food Friday. And today, what we're going to be going over is a little bit of a nutrition masterclass. So, for any of you that don't know or haven't seen, I'm tangled up in what is it? That was not relevant to what I was saying though. So, for anyone that hasn't seen, the last few days I've been at Pure Gym, delivering these nutrition masterclasses. I can't believe this. Right. Delivering these nutrition masterclasses because we spend so much time focusing on activity, doing classes. Rarely do we ever talk about nutrition. However, for inside SKC and the coaching group, we allocate at least a Friday, and then obviously with our one-to-one as well, we do focus on nutrition quite a lot because you can't outwork a bad diet. So I think it's so relevant and so important to go over nutrition and as a masterclass, just going over some of the basics, just so we're all good and we're all on the same page. Before we get started, nutrition is always a ever-growing science. So something that might be relevant and true today may not be true and relevant tomorrow. So that's why it's always so important to keep talking about it because as new research gets found and discovered and new things get published, we always learn new stuff. So nutrition is always worth the conversation, and it's always worth keeping things updated. So anything that I say today is backed by the overwhelming amount of research, not just maybe some new research that has come out and we've discovered in the past few days or weeks. This is the overwhelming research, and this is what data is shown. And it also focuses on the majority of the population, not the couple of percent where it might not be relevant to. So having said that, we're going to go over all of the basics today, and we shall get started. So if you go on to the next slide. What is a diet? So all of the conversations that I was having when I got asked, or when I asked this question to the audience was, diet is something that you follow. It's like a short-term thing. You restrict certain foods. Um, you follow it for a couple of weeks. Maybe the word carbohydrates always come up. You're not allowed carbohydrates. Maybe it's keto. Maybe it's a time frame. Maybe you're intermittent fasting. Forget all of that. Diet is just what we eat over a long period of time. So maybe we look at a year, maybe we look at 2 years, 5 years. Zoom out. If you put all of the food that you consume and you put it all into groups and kind of you looked at it, that is what your diet is. Fact. Um, so a diet isn't something that we do to lose weight or gain weight. Diet is what we consume. Okay. So following a diet or following a fad diet, then yeah, it's a little bit of a different context. But an actual diet is just what we consume on a day-to-day basis. And then when we zoom out, we look at what that diet looks like, and that's how we assess it, and that's how we go. So I heard a quote today, and it's like average people or below average people will focus on the short term, the fad diets. People who are above average focus on the long term, the actual because we understand or they realize that things don't change overnight and that it's consistency and hard work and going over and over again that leads to the place that you want to be. And again, we're talking about, 3, 4, 5 years. If you've had, you know, 10, 20 years of food abuse, do you think that 6 months of a diet is going to fix that? It's not. And exactly the same with exercise. Do you think that 20 years of no exercise, you're going to be able to make loads of changes in a couple of weeks? It just doesn't work like that. The math doesn't math. All right. So again, focusing on the bigger term, the bigger picture, because things don't get fixed over a short term period of time. And if you do think that happens, then you'll be in a shock because you'll end up usually in a worse position than when you started. So diet is something that we consume over a long period of time. Next up, eat well plate. Something that we should probably have all seen. But what is it? So this is what the NHS recommends. And any time that we're talking about nutrition, we always try and focus on, the NHS and, what our Department of Health has produced in the UK, because again, that is our body. Some bits we might not agree with, but that is what, our Department of Health has produced. And then it's our, interpretation where we want to step in and make some changes. But overall, in terms of a balanced diet, this is pretty much perfect. So this is what your plate should be looking like. Some carbohydrates, some starchy carbohydrates, just to keep the energy lasting for longer. So your potatoes, your rices, breads, you've got porridge there, spaghetti. On the other side, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals from our fruit and vegetables. So you can have a range of that there. Yeah, recommendations are 10 a day. But if you get your five a day, then we're looking good still. Then you've got a small proportion that's allocated to proteins, your beans, your pulses, chicken, mince, whatnot. And then a little bit from dairy, which will also be our fats, and then oil and spreads, which also come under fats, saturated fats. Not to forget water, if I move my face out of the way, water as well. 6 to 8 glasses a day, or our 2 liters says there. Fruit juices or smoothies, keep it at a total of 150 mils a day, just because of the sugars. It's high sugar content, especially if it's like fruits. Once it's blended, it's very fast absorbing sugar. The sugar builds up. Not that, and again, it's a difficult one because it doesn't mean that the fruit is gonna spike the sugar regardless. Fruit is fruit, but you do lose the fiber, and it's better to have the fruits whole. But again, does it spike it more than others? Research is still being done. It doesn't really look like it, but we want to limit because it's so easy just to drink all of the sugar rather than eat it. So I think that's where it really comes from, is the fact of you could literally just be chugging loads and loads of smoothies, not realize, but you wouldn't be able to eat like 5 bananas, for example. So I think that's where you need to be careful with the smoothies, not really because of the intakes and the balances. And then we reduce our sweetened food and drinks, so crisp, chocolate, and any fizzy drinks and stuff like that. So this is what our plate should be looking like. So when we look at our plates, just try and picture the Eat Well guide and think, oh, is this what my plate looks like? Do I have roughly about, that many? So not those exact foods, obviously, but in terms of proportions, it's, whatever, like 35% fruit and veg is 35% carbs, and then is the other 30% proteins and fats. Then we go on to our next slide. So, macronutrients. So, our macronutrients, what are they? So, these are our proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Okay. So, hopefully, we know at least one or two, hopefully, three of them. If not, perfect. We're going over it now. So, protein 20% of the diet should be focused on our protein. This is the building blocks for our muscles, aid in recovery, also the immune system, enzyme, and hormone production. So, protein is vital for our body. Again, it's the building blocks, highly related to like our DNA production. Every time that we're replenishing our cells, protein is involved. Okay, so we need a decent amount of protein. To actually grow muscle, there is a limit, and there is, kind of like not like a maximum, but there's an optimal amount for building muscle and whatnot. So you don't actually need as much as you think you do. There's other reasons why you'd be having more protein, and we'll go into that later, but not specifically for building muscle. So to actually build muscle, you only need a small amount. But then there's other benefits of protein, which again we'll talk about later, is for the reasons why you'd have like a high protein diet. So I think that's a really important thing to note as well. So carbohydrates, the main energy system for the body. Don't let anyone ever tell you different. Okay. So 50% of the diet should be allocated to carbohydrates. It's the main source of energy for the body, especially when it comes to the brain, muscles, and really, really important if you're doing exercise that is longer than an hour. And again, really important for recovery. So people forget about recovery as well. Protein is always, everyone's drilled in about having protein after exercise. You have to make sure you've got carbohydrates as well, because they're just as important for your recovery as protein. Now, the reason why carbohydrates are so important to exercise is because, carbohydrates is our energy source, right? So as we exercise, we start to deplete that carbohydrate, whether it be, I'm trying to keep things in very simple terms. So whether it be the ready available energy from carbohydrates or the stored energy from carbohydrates, that has a limit. So once we kind of go past that hour and a half of moderate to high intensity exercise, we then need to replenish those stores. The body craves carbohydrates because it needs its energy source back. Once those stores are depleted, guess where it's going? It's going to the muscle, that nice, tasty energy. Okay. So if you're not fueling the body with carbohydrates after exercise, you're going to start to sacrifice that protein intake and the muscles. Fat. Now, this is the longer term storage fuel for the body. So 30% is allocated towards fat. Again, vital for the body. It stores the energy. So, over long periods of time where we're not eating, fat is just slowly burning away at low intensity exercise. So low low intensity exercise comes from our fat. Moderate to high is carbohydrates. So when we're doing things like walking, that's when we're burning the most fat. And, it's just ticking along throughout the day. So again, besides that, really helps with the absorption of vitamins, hormones, and again, brain health. Especially when we look at the omega 3s and sixes, really important for our brain. So that is kind of like our free macronutrients, and that's how much we should be having, and that is kind of what they do. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, or if you're watching over from the group, drop a question in the group chat, and we'll have a discussion about it, or you can message me privately. But yeah, we'll go on to the next slide. So it's all good and well knowing what how much we should be having or what they do. What happens when we don't have enough? So common causes of deficiency, or if we don't have enough of these things, and most of them are correlated, but again, it's important to go over them regardless. So protein, muscle loss and weakness. So as I said before, if there's not enough carbohydrates for energy, guess where your body's going to go? It's going to start eating away at that protein, that muscle, because it's tasty, it's nice, it's so much better than fat. Increase hunger and cravings. Protein is satiating. It's filling. The more protein you have, the less hungry you're gonna feel. Okay, so if you're depleted, if you don't have enough protein, you're gonna be more hungry. You're gonna want to snack throughout the day. Slower to heal wounds. That again, when we say about the DNA, the cell reproduction, you need protein. Fatigue and low energy. And that's why that's in the middle of protein and carbohydrates, because there's a combination of both. Without enough carbohydrates, without enough protein, you're going to feel fatigued. You're going to be low on energy, especially if you're someone who's looking to lose weight and you're in a calorie deficit. You're not going to have a lot of energy. So you need to make sure that you've got the right balances of these things to perform at your best, even when you're having low amounts of energy, um, calories throughout the day. Carbohydrates, brain fog, and poor concentration. Cognitive function is so important when we're looking at carbohydrates. Again, when we look at athletes, when they're depleted of energy, you see them shaking, they can't think straight. Guess what happens when we're exercising and we can't think straight? We start to increase the risk of injury because we're not thinking straight. Our balance could be off. It's so important to have carbohydrates before exercise to make sure that we've got enough of a fuel to then be able to carry that through. Time and time again, in my experience, yeah, as a PT, anyone who doesn't eat usually then ends up suffering from low energy, or has to take a few minutes out just to recover, um, because they haven't eaten before, and that's just the way it is. And again, like honestly, I've been in this situation so many times, and luckily where I work, there's always a Lucozade to hand. So, it's just a matter of getting some Lucozade, sitting down, waiting a few minutes, letting those sugars go into the bloodstream to get the body kick-started again. But again, carbohydrates are so important because without them, you will start to feel, again, that's where that dizziness and lightheadedness comes from. Then if we're low in fats, poor absorption of vitamins. Vitamins are stored in the body. So vitamins like A, D, E, K, they're fat vitamins, so they're stored in our fat, they're stored in the body, not like vitamin C where it's water-based, so it kind of comes and goes. These vitamins are stored in the body, so with low amounts of good fats in the body, we affect the absorption rates of those, hormonal imbalances, and joint pain as well. So that's some of the causes of if you're deficient in food or you're not having the right foods or not enough foods. That's what we're looking at. So just as a recap, so we've got our proteins, the building blocks of the body. We've got our carbohydrates, the energy source. We've got our fats for cell production, storing vitamins, brain function as well, joint pain, all of that good stuff. So we need to have a good balance of all these things, because as soon as we take one away, it starts to create some complications. The most important thing, though, as I always say, is our bodies are extremely robust. So if you are missing one thing or if you're not having enough of one thing, our body does tend to work it out. But again, what we are always looking at is trying to be optimal with everything, which can be difficult as humans, especially with work, kids, all these demands that we have on life. But where possible, we just try and be as optimal as possible so then we can continue with our exercise and we can perform our best. Maybe not for ourselves, but maybe the others around us, if we are talking about kids, maybe some people that rely on you. So we want to make sure that we're having a good balance and we've got all of those things. So then we move on to the next bit. So protein. So we're going to go into the types of food, what you can have, if you are deficient, if you're not having enough of these things, what can you do to replace it? So I've got protein. You might recognize this from the other slides if you've been following along. So which is better, animal or plant? So you've got complete proteins and you've got incomplete proteins. If you go back to some of my videos on the channel and you click on the protein one, then we go into depth about this. However, at the minute, we're just going to briefly go over it. So animal proteins, they're complete proteins. So we're going to get all of our essential amino acids from the animal proteins, which pretty much means that we get all of the essential building blocks from animal protein. With plant, soya is a complete protein. However, most of the others are incomplete. So you need a mix of different plant-based foods to then get that complete protein. So you might have to pair chickpeas and peanuts with lentils, black beans throughout the day. It doesn't have to be all in one meal, but as long as throughout the day you've kind of got a mixture of all of these things, having a wide range of food sources to then complete that protein and make sure that you're recovering at your best, that's what you're going to have to do. Whereas if you are animal based, then you kind of get away with it. Your eggs, your dairy, chicken, complete proteins. So it depends what you define as better. Um, but there's always, no one should ever feel left out. So it's all well and good being vegan, vegetarian, even like from a carnivore. We just need to know how to do it appropriately and safely so that we can perform at our best, because that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what your food preference is. So if you are plant-based, how can we make sure that you're getting enough of the essential amino acids through all of the foods so then you're not missing out and you're not, falling behind over something that's not your fault. So yeah. So if you are having like your um meat-based proteins, then you're all good. Yeah. So yeah, then you're all good. I got really scared then because I'm not sure if the audio has been working, but we'll find out later anyways. Um, cool. Hello. Okay, yeah, cool. So if I get through this recording and it hasn't um picked up audio, I'll go, oh my, that would be so painful. Carbohydrates, guys. Okay, cool. So carbohydrates, the one that always gets asked about. Um, especially on social media, carbohydrates are absolutely slammed. You can't have enough, it's bad for you, blah blah blah. Let's go over this. So carbohydrates, um, starchy carbs and sugars. Look, we're just going to keep it real simple again. Like, we're not trying to complicate things. We're not going to go into the science of things. We're going to keep it simple. Starchy carbs, are complex carbohydrates, longer chains of sugars, and it takes longer to break down. The sugars, they're simple carbohydrates and they're quickly broken down by the body for immediate energy. So sugars or some of these foods like um fruit, sugar, biscuits, some of the things that are listed here, honey, they're simple carbohydrates. So as soon as you have them, it goes straight into the bloodstream and it's sugar and it's energy that's ready now. So when you see athletes or people running, they're taking their gels, they might have some Haribos, maybe after a football match or a rugby game, you see them with their jelly babies. That's immediate energy to replenish those stores that have been depleted while exercising. The complex carbohydrates is the later thing. It's the gradual thing. So if you're having bread in the morning, if you're having rice in the morning, that's going to slowly release that energy throughout the day. Um, and it kind of fuels you longer term rather than that instant buzz. Okay. So that's the difference between the two. And that's how you can strategize what you eat when you eat it. So the rice is longer term. And if you are having it for dinner, then it's going to be great for, overnight, the recovery of the body, carbohydrates going into the muscles while you're sleeping. If you're having like the breads in the morning or the potatoes, whatever it is, it's going to release throughout the day. Whereas the fruits, the biscuits, that's going to be straight away. So maybe after you exercise or after you've done something. That's the best time to have it because that's when the body needs it and it's going to utilize it for all the right things. Fats. So we've got our saturated fats, and I think this is the most important one to talk about when we do go through fats. So saturated fats, solid at room temperature, are mostly found in animal sources, red meat, butter, cheese. So that's the downside, or that's just the cost of animal-based foods. Men are recommended to have no more than 30 grams a day, and women 20 grams a day. So, for example, normal cheddar cheese, 100 grams of that is going to be 21 grams of saturated fat. Do you know how easy it is to have 100 grams of cheese? You might go, oh, that's a lot. I promise you, if you've got a bowl of pasta, you've got a bowl of bolognese, whatever, lasagna, and if you pick up cheese and you chuck it on and you go, you look at it, you're like, actually, that's not enough. You put some more. That's going to be your 100 grams. Okay. It's so easy to cap your and like hit your saturated fat goals. So you just need to be aware. Look at the back of packaging. Look how much there is. How to fix this or how to resolve this, go for the lower in fat products. There's always a cost of that. So, sometimes it might be higher in salt, it might be higher in something else. Um, but again, you're avoiding that saturated fat. So, um, for example, like the cheddar cheese, if you get the 50% reduced fat, then obviously it's going to be 8 grams of saturated fat per 100 grams rather than the 21. Um, So just watch out for your saturated fats as well. Saturated fats, there are benefits, but as an individual, it's a lot more dangerous than, especially when we talk about seed oil, especially when we talk about social media going after carbohydrates and stuff like that. Seed oils is another thing that kind of gets bashed on social media. Um, from from what research has suggested, saturated fats are just as bad for the body as seed oils, or if not worse. So everything's going to kill you at the end of the day. So it's just about moderation, okay? And that's the best way about it. So just make sure you've got a good balance of everything. Don't demonize anything because that's when you start having food, or disorderly eating. So just make sure that everything's in moderation. So don't cut things out because you think it's going to kill you, because it's probably not. Our body's pretty robust and it can deal with these things. Just make sure you've got a good balance and be aware. All right. I think that's the most important thing. Just be aware that that's how much saturated fat you should be having a day. If you do go over, it's cool. You're not going to drop dead. You've been doing it for years. Just be aware of what the recommendations are. And it's more important that, saturated fat, seed oils, whatever it is, it always depends on how many calories you're having in a day as well. So if you're abusing your calories, and you're having like way over your like maintenance amount of calories, then it's going to be a problem because it's the excess of saturated fat. Whereas if you're in a calorie deficit and you have a little bit of extra saturated fat, it's going to be used for energy because that's what our body needs to survive, right? So just looking at that as well. Essential fats, so you've got your omega-3s and omega-6s. This comes from like fatty fish, as it says, like salmon, flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts. Really good for brain function, inflammation as well, and your heart health, and also your joints. So if you are struggling with joints or anything like that, omega-3 is your winner. And it does need to be regulated or in conjunction with omega-6. And again, look, it's found in vegetable oils. And although it's necessary, too much will promote inflammation. So you need a good balance for them to both be there. So this is the part where I ask everyone if they have any questions, but obviously you're watching this over. So if you do have any questions, comment below. If there's anything that I said that you don't agree with, comment below. Or message me privately if you're in the group. And if you do want to learn more about the group, follow me over on Instagram. My thing is Sean Kenny _ follow me, drop me a DM, say that you watch this, get in touch. And if you have any questions or if you disagree with anything I said, let me know. But hopefully this was helpful. And again, it's just nutrition is something that's always evolving. So I don't claim to know anything. I spent 3 years at uni doing nutrition. And it's an ever-growing science. It's always changing. There's always new research coming out. So if I was wrong about anything, then I'll put my hands up. But I'm pretty certain that everything that we covered today is up to date. It's it's what can we say? It's the generic advice for 98% of the population. And we need to look at things on a longer term basis, the 5 years, the 10 years, not the 6 months or the 6 weeks, because that's not going to change anything. Um, so yeah, hopefully this gave some insight. Hopefully this helped a little bit. If you want to learn anything different or want to go over anything else, let me know. And I will see you next week for the next Food Friday. Hopefully this helped catch you in the next one.